London in the mid-19th century was a city unlike any that had existed before in human history. Picture, if you will, a sprawling metropolis where over 2 million souls lived, worked, and endured together in an age when the Industrial Revolution had transformed not just how people worked, but how they experienced the very seasons themselves. This was a time when the word smog had not yet been invented, though the thick, choking mixture of coal smoke and fog that would later bear this name already blanketed the city for months at a time during the colder seasons. The Victorian era, spanning from 1837 to 1901 during Queen Victoria's remarkable reign, represented a period of unprecedented change and contrast. While the wealthy enjoyed newfound luxuries brought by industrial prosperity, the working classes found themselves navigating challenges that their rural ancestors could never have imagined. Winter, which had always been a season of hardship for humanity, took on entirely new dimensions of difficulty in this rapidly growing urban environment. To understand why winters were so particularly brutal in Victorian London, we must first appreciate the sheer scale of transformation that had occurred. In just a few generations, London had evolved from a relatively modest medieval city into the largest urban center the world had ever known. The population had exploded as people flocked from the countryside seeking work in the new factories, mills, and workshops that powered Britain's industrial dominance. These newcomers crowded into hastily constructed neighborhoods where narrow streets barely allowed sunlight to penetrate even during the brightest summer days. The city's geography played a crucial role in creating its harsh winter conditions. London sits in the Thames Valley, a natural basin that tends to trap air and moisture. During winter months, this geographical feature became a container for the massive amounts of coal smoke produced by hundreds of thousands of individual fires. Every home, no matter how humble, burned coal for heating and cooking. Every factory, workshop, and mill consumed vast quantities of coal to power their steam engines. The railway stations that had begun to ring the city added their own contribution to the smoky atmosphere, as did the growing number of gasworks that provided lighting for the streets and wealthier homes. But the story of Victorian London's brutal winters begins with coal itself. This black, fossilized organic matter had become the lifeblood of British civilization. It was coal that powered the steam engines in the textile mills of Manchester and Birmingham. It was coal that propelled the great iron ships that carried British goods to every corner of the empire. And it was coal that every Londoner, from the wealthiest merchant to the poorest street sweeper, depended upon to survive the cold months. The quality of coal available to different social classes varied dramatically, and this difference would prove crucial to understanding the varying experiences of winter hardship. The wealthy could afford the finest anthracite coal, which burned cleanly and produced substantial heat with relatively little smoke. The middle classes made do with good quality bituminous coal that provided adequate warmth, but contributed significantly to the city's growing pollution problem. The poor, however, had access only to the cheapest grades of coal, often mixed with slate, ash, and other impurities that produced minimal heat while generating enormous quantities of acrid, choking smoke. The very architecture of Victorian London contributed to the harsh winter conditions. The rapid construction boom that accompanied population growth had prioritized speed and profit over comfort or health. Entire neighborhoods sprang up with houses built so close together that they formed dark canyons where wind could howl, but sunlight rarely reached. Many of these hastily constructed buildings had walls only 1 brick thick, providing minimal insulation against the cold. Windows, when they existed, were often ill-fitting and allowed drafts to penetrate even the most carefully heated rooms. The streets themselves presented another challenge during winter months. London's famous fog, which would later become known as pea soup fog due to its thick, yellowish appearance, was actually a mixture of natural moisture and coal smoke that could reduce visibility to mere inches. On the worst days, people could become lost just yards from their own front doors. The fog carried with it not just the smell of coal smoke, but also the accumulated odors of a city with inadequate sanitation systems, creating an atmosphere that was both physically and psychologically oppressive. Transportation during winter months became a nightmare of epic proportions. The horse-drawn omnibuses that served as public transportation frequently became stuck in the thick mud that formed when rain mixed with horse manure and ash from countless coal fires. The Thames, which served as both a transportation route and a source of water for many Londoners, would sometimes freeze solid during particularly harsh winters, cutting off crucial supply lines and creating additional hardships for the city's inhabitants. The Thames itself tells a fascinating story about Victorian London's relationship with winter. Unlike today, when the river is kept flowing by modern engineering, the Victorian Thames was wider, shallower, and more prone to freezing. When the Great River froze, as it did several times during the 19th century, it created spectacular frost fairs where Londoners could walk, shop, and even roast oxen on the thick ice. But these magical winter celebrations masked a grimmer reality. When the Thames froze, the water supply for large portions of the city became unreliable, and the sewage systems, primitive as they were, could back up and overflow into the streets. The clothing of the era, while elegant in appearance, provided inadequate protection against the harsh winter conditions. Men's fashion called for thin woolen trousers and coats that prioritized appearance over warmth. Women's clothing, with its emphasis on narrow waists and flowing skirts, left much of the body exposed to cold drafts. The layers of petticoats that created the fashionable silhouette of the era actually provided some insulation, but the tight corsets that were considered essential for respectability restricted breathing and circulation, making it harder for women to maintain body heat. Even the wealthy, with their grand townhouses and country estates, could not entirely escape the harsh realities of Victorian winter. Their large homes, while impressive, were expensive to heat and often featured high ceilings that allowed warm air to rise far above the living spaces. The fashionable practice of having numerous rooms meant that heat was dispersed throughout the house rather than concentrated where people actually spent their time. Servants, who were essential to maintaining these grand households, often lived in unheated attic rooms where frost could form on the inside of windows even when fires burned brightly in the main living areas below. The diet available during winter months contributed significantly to the population's vulnerability to cold. Fresh fruits and vegetables were rare and expensive during the winter, leaving most Londoners to subsist on preserved meats, dried beans, and whatever root vegetables could be stored through the season. This limited diet, lacking in essential vitamins and nutrients, weakened immune systems and made people more susceptible to the respiratory illnesses that flourished in the city's polluted air. Medical understanding of the time provided little help for those suffering from winter-related ailments. The connection between coal smoke and respiratory illness was not yet understood, and many of the symptoms we would now recognize as pollution-related were attributed to moral failings or constitutional weaknesses. Doctors prescribed treatments that often made conditions worse, such as bloodletting for patients who were already weakened by poor nutrition and exposure to cold. The rhythm of daily life in Victorian London was dramatically altered by winter conditions. Work began before dawn and continued well after sunset, but the combination of coal smoke and natural fog often meant that street lamps had to be lit throughout the day. Gaslighting, still a relatively new technology, provided some illumination but added its own contribution to the city's growing air pollution problem. The flickering, uncertain light of gas lamps created an atmosphere of perpetual twilight that could last for weeks during the worst winter weather. Children, particularly those from working-class families, bore the brunt of winter's harsh effects. Many worked in factories or as street vendors, spending long hours exposed to the elements with inadequate clothing and nutrition. The combination of physical stress, poor diet, and constant exposure to coal smoke created a generation of young people whose health was permanently compromised by their winter experiences. Schools, where they existed, provided little relief from the harsh conditions. Most were unheated except for a single fireplace in the main room, and students often sat in overcrowded conditions that promoted the spread of respiratory illnesses. Many children simply stopped attending school during the worst winter months, creating gaps in education that would affect them throughout their lives. The sounds of Victorian London in winter created their own unique symphony of survival. The constant coughing of people struggling with respiratory ailments mixed with the clip-clop of horses' hooves on cobblestones, the rumble of cart wheels over uneven streets, and the calls of street vendors trying to make themselves heard through the thick, muffling fog. Church bells, which had traditionally marked the rhythm of daily life, often became muted and distant, their sound absorbed by the heavy, polluted air. As evening approached in this Victorian winter world, families would gather around their coal fires, grateful for whatever warmth they could afford. The wealthy might enjoy multiple fireplaces and the luxury of well-heated rooms, while the poor huddled together around a single small grate, burning whatever fuel they could obtain. But rich or poor, all Londoners shared the experience of air so thick with smoke that it stung the eyes and burned the throat, creating a common bond of endurance that transcended social class. This was the world that Charles Dickens wrote about, where the contrast between warmth and cold, light and darkness, comfort and hardship created the dramatic tensions that defined an entire era. It was a world where winter was not just a season, but a test of human resilience, ingenuity, and community spirit. Understanding this context helps us appreciate not just the physical challenges that Victorians faced, but also the remarkable adaptations and innovations they developed to survive and even thrive in conditions that would challenge any modern urban dweller. Imagine stepping off one of the great railway carriages at Paddington Station on a cold December morning in 1865. The journey from the countryside has taken several hours, and as the steam locomotive hisses to a stop, releasing great clouds of vapor into the already thick air, you become immediately aware that you have entered a world unlike anything you have experienced before. The station itself, with its magnificent iron and glass architecture, represents the pinnacle of Victorian engineering achievement. Yet even this modern marvel cannot protect its occupants from the harsh realities of London's winter climate. The first sensation that strikes you is the quality of the air itself. It is not simply cold, though the temperature is certainly bitter enough to sting exposed skin within moments. Rather, it is the thickness of the atmosphere that proves most unsettling. The air seems almost solid, laden with moisture and smoke that creates a tangible presence between yourself and the world around you. Each breath requires a conscious effort, as if you were attempting to breathe liquid rather than air. The taste is immediately recognizable, even to someone experiencing it for the first time. A mixture of coal smoke, sulfur, and the indefinable flavor of thousands of lives lived in close proximity. As you make your way from the platform toward the station's main concourse, the sounds of Victorian London in winter begin to penetrate your consciousness. The echo of footsteps on wet stone creates a constant percussion that speaks of countless people moving through their daily routines despite the challenging conditions. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell tolls the hour, its sound muffled and mysterious, as if it were calling from another world entirely. The cry of street vendors mingles with the clip-clop of horses' hooves, creating a symphony that is both familiar and utterly foreign to modern ears. The visual landscape that greets you upon leaving the station is perhaps the most striking aspect of Victorian London in winter. The famous London fog, which locals have begun to call pea soup due to its thick, yellowish-green appearance, transforms the familiar into the fantastical. Buildings that should be clearly visible across the street become vague, looming shapes that seem to shift and change as the fog swirls around them. Gas lamps, lit even at midday, create small pools of amber light that struggle against the enveloping darkness, their glow barely penetrating more than a few feet into the murky atmosphere. The people you encounter in this winter world present a fascinating study in adaptation and resilience. Well-dressed gentlemen emerge from the fog like characters from a Gothic novel, their top hats beaded with moisture, their walking sticks tapping against the cobblestones as they navigate by sound as much as sight. Ladies, bundled in dark wool coats and muffs, move with careful precision, their skirts lifted slightly to avoid the worst of the mud and slush that covers every surface. Working-class men and women, less elegantly dressed, but no less determined, hurry past with the efficient movements of people who have learned to navigate these conditions as a matter of daily survival. The architecture that surrounds you tells its own story of adaptation to winter's challenges. The grand Georgian and Victorian buildings, with their ornate facades and impressive proportions, seem designed more for show than for comfort. Their tall windows, beautiful in concept, provide large surfaces for heat to escape and cold drafts to enter. The decorative ironwork that adorns balconies and railings has become a canvas for frost and ice, creating beautiful but treacherous conditions for anyone bold enough to venture onto these elevated spaces. As you begin to walk through the streets, the physical sensation of Victorian London winter becomes increasingly apparent. The cold seems to penetrate not just your clothing, but your very bones, creating an ache that is both sharp and persistent. The moisture in the air, suspended as it is in the coal smoke fog, has a way of seeping through even the best woolen garments, creating a clammy dampness that no amount of layering seems able to prevent. Your fingers, despite whatever gloves you might wear, quickly become stiff and clumsy, making simple tasks like opening doors or handling coins a challenge that requires conscious effort. The cobblestone streets beneath your feet present their own particular challenges. Wet from the constant moisture in the air and slippery with a combination of ice, ash, and the ever-present horse manure, they require constant attention to navigate safely. The uneven surface, charming perhaps in warmer weather, becomes a potential hazard with every step. The sound of your footsteps echoes off the surrounding buildings, creating an oddly intimate acoustic environment where every movement seems amplified and significant. The smell of Victorian London in winter is complex and overwhelming. The dominant scent is certainly that of coal smoke, not the clean, dry smell of wood smoke that might drift from a countryside cottage, but the acrid, sulfurous odor of thousands of coal fires burning simultaneously. Beneath this primary layer, however, are countless other aromas that speak to the density and complexity of urban life. The smell of horses, ever present in a city that depends entirely on animal power for transportation, mingles with the sense of cooking food, unwashed bodies, industrial processes, and the Thames itself, which carries its own distinctive mixture of water, mud, and less pleasant substances. The lighting conditions in Victorian London winter create an atmosphere that is both mysterious and oppressive. Even when the sun is theoretically shining, the thick layer of smoke and fog reduces daylight to a dim, amber glow that barely distinguishes day from night. Gas lamps, still a relatively new technology in many parts of the city, flicker with an uncertain light that creates pools of illumination in the general gloom. The effect is simultaneously romantic and sinister, transforming familiar streets into landscapes that could have been lifted from a fairy tale or a nightmare. As you continue your exploration of this winter world, you begin to notice the subtle signs of how people have adapted to these harsh conditions. Shop windows, glowing warmly from within, beckon with promises of warmth and shelter. The smell of hot food from street vendors becomes particularly enticing when experienced against the backdrop of pervasive cold and dampness. Public houses, with their frosted windows and warm golden lights spilling onto the street, present themselves as havens of comfort and community in an otherwise challenging environment. The clothing you observe tells its own story of practical adaptation to winter conditions. While fashion certainly plays a role in how people dress, necessity has clearly influenced many choices. Men wear heavy woolen overcoats that reach nearly to their ankles, and many sport mufflers wrapped around their necks to protect against the penetrating dampness. Women's fashion, constrained as it is by social expectations, still shows evidence of winter adaptation. Thicker fabrics, darker colors that won't show the inevitable soot stains, and additional layers all speak to the practical requirements of surviving a London winter. The traffic that moves through these winter streets creates its own particular atmosphere. Horse-drawn vehicles of all descriptions navigate the challenging conditions with varying degrees of success. Elegant private carriages move with careful precision, their drivers bundled in heavy coats and blankets. Omnibuses, crowded with passengers seeking both transportation and the warmth of shared body heat, lumber through the streets with determination that seems almost heroic given the conditions. Handsome cabs dart between larger vehicles with the agility that makes them so popular among those who can afford their services. The River Thames, visible in the distance as you move toward the heart of the city, presents its own winter personality. During particularly cold spells, ice forms along its edges, creating a border of white that contrasts dramatically with the dark water. The famous Thames fog, generated by the interaction of the river's moisture with the city's coal smoke, seems to rise from the water like steam from a giant cauldron. River traffic continues despite the challenging conditions, with barges and steamships moving like ghostly apparitions through the murky atmosphere. The parks and open spaces of London, normally places of respite and recreation, take on an entirely different character during winter months. Hyde Park, normally filled with fashionable strollers and riders, becomes a vast, misty expanse where the famous Speaker's Corner seems to echo with the voices of invisible orators. The bare trees, their branches etched against the pale winter sky, create silhouettes that are both beautiful and melancholy. The few hardy souls who venture into these spaces move with purpose, seeking the health benefits of fresh air while struggling against the harsh conditions. As afternoon transitions into evening, the character of Victorian London winter becomes even more pronounced. The early darkness, combined with the ever-present fog, creates an atmosphere where time seems suspended. Gas lamps begin to flicker to life earlier and earlier, creating a network of small beacons in the gathering gloom. The sounds of the city take on a different quality as visibility decreases. Voices seem to come from nowhere, footsteps echo with mysterious significance, and the clip-clop of horses' hooves becomes a comforting rhythm that helps pedestrians navigate by sound when sight fails them. The shops and businesses that line the streets provide fascinating glimpses into how commercial life adapts to winter conditions. Windows glow invitingly, displaying wares that promise warmth and comfort. Bookshops, their windows steamed from the warmth within, offer the promise of hours spent in comfortable contemplation. Tea shops, already becoming an institution in London life, present themselves as refuges where cold and dampness can be temporarily forgotten in favor of warmth and conversation. This first day in Victorian London, winter reveals itself as an education in human adaptability and resilience. Despite conditions that would challenge any modern urban dweller, life continues with a determination that is both inspiring and humbling. People work, shop, socialize, and simply live their lives with an acceptance of hardship that speaks to fundamental human strength. The harsh conditions, rather than defeating the human spirit, seem to have created a particular kind of community solidarity, where shared suffering becomes a bond that transcends social class and individual circumstance. As the winter afternoon light begins its early fade into the perpetual twilight of Victorian London, the search for suitable accommodations becomes increasingly urgent. The cold has begun to penetrate even the thickest clothing, and the constant dampness for the fog-laden air has created a bone-deep chill that no amount of walking seems able to dispel. The streets, which seemed merely challenging in the morning light, now take on an almost threatening quality as shadows deepen and the gas lamps struggle to penetrate the thickening atmosphere. Your search for lodging leads you through increasingly narrow streets, where the tall buildings seem to lean inward, creating canyon-like passages that trap both cold air and the ever-present coal smoke. The boarding houses and small hotels that cater to visitors of modest means present themselves with varying degrees of welcome. Some display hand-painted signs advertising clean beds and warm rooms, though the definition of these comforts varies considerably depending on the establishment's clientele and the landlord's interpretation of hospitality. The first boarding house you encounter sits on a corner where two narrow streets intersect, its brick facade blackened by years of coal smoke until the original red color has been transformed into a uniform dark gray. A small brass plate beside the door announces Mrs. Pemberton's lodging house, respectable accommodations for gentlemen and ladies. The door, painted a dark green that might once have been cheerful but now appears somber in the dim light, stands slightly ajar, allowing a thin stream of warm air to escape into the cold street. This small sign of interior warmth is almost irresistibly inviting after hours spent in the harsh outdoor conditions. Stepping across the threshold into Mrs. Pemberton's establishment provides immediate relief from the bitter cold, though it also introduces a new set of sensory experiences that define the indoor environment of Victorian London winter. The warmth, generated by a coal fire burning in the front parlor, carries with it the complex aromas of a building where many people live in close proximity. The smell of coal smoke, omnipresent outdoors, continues indoors but mingles with the sense of cooking food, damp wool clothing, carbolic soap, and the indefinable odor of a building that has housed countless inhabitants over many years. Mrs. Pemberton herself, a woman of middle age whose comfortable proportions speak to her success in the boarding house business, emerges from what appears to be a kitchen area at the rear of the building. Her dress, practical and dark to hide the inevitable stains that come from managing a busy household, is protected by a large apron that has clearly seen considerable use. Her manner is brisk, but not unkind, reflecting the practical efficiency required to manage such an establishment during the challenging winter months. The tour of available accommodations reveals the ingenious ways that Victorian boarding house operators have learned to maximize both space and warmth. The rooms, necessarily small to fit as many paying guests as possible into the available space, are arranged with careful attention to heat conservation. Those closest to the communal fireplace command higher prices, while rooms on upper floors, farther from the heat source but closer to the roof, are offered at more modest rates to guests who are willing to sacrifice some comfort for economy. Your assigned room, located on the second floor at the rear of the building, represents a typical example of middle-class lodging in Victorian London. The space, perhaps 10 feet by 12 feet, contains the essential furnishings required for basic comfort. A narrow bed with a thick feather mattress and heavy woolen blankets, a small writing desk positioned near the single window, a washstand with a ceramic basin and pitcher, and a modest wardrobe for storing personal belongings. The walls, papered in a pattern of dark roses that has faded to a muted burgundy, show signs of the dampness that plagues all London buildings during winter months. The window, the room's single source of natural light, presents a fascinating study in the challenges of Victorian winter living. The glass, a relatively expensive feature in lower-priced accommodations, is divided into small panes held together by lead mullions. During cold weather, condensation forms on the inside surface, creating patterns of frost that are beautiful but also indicative of the significant temperature difference between indoor and outdoor environments. The view from this window, when it can be seen through the fog, encompasses a small courtyard surrounded by similar buildings, their windows glowing like warm jewels in the gathering darkness. The heating arrangements for the room reflect the complex relationship between comfort and economy that defines Victorian domestic life. A small grate in one corner can accommodate a coal fire, but fuel must be purchased separately and carried up from the ground floor storage area. The cost of coal, while modest for occasional use, becomes a significant expense when calculated over the course of a long winter. Many guests, particularly those staying for extended periods, develop elaborate strategies for maximizing warmth while minimizing fuel consumption. The ritual of lighting the evening fire becomes a meditation on the relationship between human comfort and natural resources. The coal, delivered earlier in the day by a soot-covered carter who has hauled it through the city streets, sits in a wooden scuttle beside the grate. The individual pieces, each one a concentrated package of ancient solar energy, represent both the promise of warmth and the economic reality of urban winter survival. The kindling, carefully saved from previous fires and supplemented with scraps of paper and wood gathered throughout the day, must be arranged with precision to ensure that the precious coal catches fire efficiently. As darkness settles over the city and the room's small fire begins to generate its circle of warmth, the sounds of the boarding house create their own evening symphony. Footsteps echo on the wooden stairs as other guests retire to their rooms. Doors close with the solid thunk of heavy wood, and the murmur of conversations drifts through walls that are substantial enough to provide privacy, but not thick enough to eliminate all sound. The building itself contributes to this acoustic environment, creaking and settling as the temperature differential between inside and outside causes the wooden structure to expand and contract. The washstand provides another opportunity to experience the unique challenges of Victorian winter living. The water in the ceramic pitcher, carried up from the kitchen earlier in the day, has taken on the temperature of the unheated room and requires considerable fortitude to use for washing. The soap, a harsh carbolic variety that reflects the Victorian obsession with cleanliness and moral purity, produces a meager lather in the cold water, but does provide the psychological comfort of proper hygiene maintenance even under challenging circumstances. Preparing for bed in a Victorian boarding house room during winter requires a complex ritual of layering and heat conservation. The bed itself, while equipped with substantial woolen blankets and a thick feather comforter, occupies a space that is significantly colder than the small area immediately around the fireplace. The transition from the warmth of the fire to the chill of the bed represents a nightly challenge that every Victorian has learned to navigate with varying degrees of success and comfort. The clothing worn to bed during winter months reflects the practical necessities of maintaining body heat throughout the night. Heavy flannel nightgowns and nightshirts, often worn over regular undergarments for additional warmth, become standard equipment for winter survival. Knitted caps, though perhaps not fashionable, provide essential protection for heads that would otherwise lose significant body heat during the long, cold hours of darkness. Wool socks, often hand-knitted by mothers, wives, or sisters, become treasured possessions that can mean the difference between restful sleep and hours of shivering discomfort. The fire in the grate, carefully banked for the night with a covering of coal dust and ash to help it burn slowly and steadily, provides both physical warmth and psychological comfort. The gentle crackling of the coal and the soft glow of the flames create an atmosphere of security and contentment that helps to offset the harsh realities of the world outside. The dancing shadows cast by the firelight on the papered walls create a private theater where imagination can transform a simple boarding house room into any setting the mind might desire. As the evening progresses and the fire settles into its slow, steady burn, the room takes on the particular atmosphere that defines Victorian winter nights. The air near the fireplace remains pleasantly warm, while areas farther from the heat source gradually cool to temperatures that, while not exactly comfortable, are at least bearable when one is properly clothed and under adequate bedding. The sound of wind moving through the city streets, muffled by the building's walls but still audible, serves as a constant reminder of the harsh conditions that exist just beyond the fragile barrier of brick and mortar. The evening routine in such accommodations often includes activities designed to make the most of the warmth and light provided by the coal fire. Reading by firelight becomes not just entertainment, but a practical necessity, as the cost of additional candles or oil lamps can quickly become prohibitive for guests on modest budgets. Writing letters to family and friends back home provides both mental stimulation and emotional comfort, helping to maintain connections that become particularly important during the isolating months of winter. The communal aspects of boarding house life become more pronounced during winter months, when the harsh outdoor conditions encourage guests to spend more time in the shared spaces of the building. The front parlor, with its larger fireplace and collection of well-worn furniture, serves as an informal gathering place where guests can share the cost of fuel while enjoying conversation and companionship. These social interactions, while sometimes awkward between strangers of different social backgrounds, often develop into friendships that help to ease the isolation and hardship of winter living. The evening meal, served in the boarding house's small dining room, provides another opportunity for communal warmth and social interaction. The food itself, while simple and sometimes monotonous, takes on special significance when consumed in warm surroundings after a day spent battling the elements. Hot soup, thick bread, and strong tea become more than mere sustenance. They represent comfort, civilization, and the human capacity to create pleasure even under challenging circumstances. As night deepens and the last sounds of activity fade from the streets outside, the boarding house settles into the particular rhythm of Victorian winter nights. The building's heating system, such as it is, begins its nightly struggle against the cold. Fireplaces in occupied rooms provide localized warmth, while unheated corridors and stairways become increasingly cold as the night progresses. The sounds of the city, muffled by fog and the insulating effect of snow when it falls, create a distant backdrop to the more immediate sounds of a building full of people seeking warmth and rest. As the fog-shrouded darkness of a Victorian winter evening settles completely over London, the boarding house where you have found refuge transforms into a haven of warmth and human activity. The harsh realities of the outside world, the biting cold, the choking fog, the treacherous streets, fade into a distant memory as you become absorbed in the particular rhythms and rituals that define indoor life during the challenging winter months. The transition from the public struggle of navigating London's winter streets to the private comfort of heated interior spaces represents one of the most profound daily experiences of Victorian urban life. Mrs. Pemberton, the boarding house proprietress, has begun her evening rounds, checking on her guests and ensuring that the various fires throughout the building are properly tended. Her presence moves through the corridors like a comforting force, the soft rustle of her heavy skirts and a gentle jingling of the keys attached to her belt creating a domestic symphony that speaks of security and careful management. In her hands, she carries a small oil lamp that casts dancing shadows on the papered walls, its warm light supplementing the gas fixtures that illuminate the main areas of the building. The dining room, located on the ground floor near the kitchen, has become the evening's center of activity. A large coal fire burns brightly in the substantial fireplace, its flames reflecting off the polished surface of a dark wooden table that can accommodate 8 diners. The walls, covered in deep green wallpaper with a pattern of golden leaves, create an atmosphere of quiet elegance despite the modest nature of the establishment. Heavy curtains, drawn against both the cold and the fog outside, help to contain the warmth while providing a sense of complete separation from the harsh external environment. The evening meal service represents a carefully orchestrated routine that maximizes both efficiency and comfort. Mrs. Pemberton, assisted by a young maid whose red hands speak of countless hours spent washing dishes in cold water, serves a simple but satisfying dinner that reflects both the limitations and the possibilities of Victorian working-class cuisine. Tonight's offering includes a hearty mutton stew, its rich aroma filling the dining room with the promise of warmth and sustenance. The meat, while perhaps not of the finest quality, has been slow-cooked with onions, carrots, and potatoes until it falls apart at the touch of a fork. The bread that accompanies the meal tells its own story about the urban food supply system that keeps London fed during the winter months. Baked earlier in the day at a neighborhood bakery, it arrives at the boarding house, still carrying the faint warmth of the ovens where it was prepared. The crust, dark and substantial, provides a satisfying contrast to the soft, white interior that soaks up the stew's rich gravy. This bread, made from flour that has traveled hundreds of miles from England's agricultural regions, represents the complex network of production and distribution that enables city life to continue even during the harshest weather. Your fellow diners represent a cross-section of London's working population, each person carrying their own story of adaptation to the city's challenging winter conditions. Mr. Henderson, a clerk in a shipping office near the Thames, speaks quietly about the difficulties of maintaining accurate records when the fog becomes so thick that gas lamps must burn throughout the day. His hands, stained with ink despite careful washing, move expressively as he describes the challenge of working in offices where the cost of adequate heating must be balanced against business profitability. Miss Richardson, a seamstress who works in one of the city's better-dressed shops, contributes her own observations about the ways that fashion adapts to winter's demands. Her work, she explains, increasingly focuses on creating garments that can provide warmth while maintaining the appearance of elegance that Victorian society demands. The challenge, she notes with professional pride, lies in designing clothing that can protect against London's particular combination of cold, dampness, and coal smoke without sacrificing the silhouette and style that distinguish the fashionable from the merely practical. Mr. and Mrs. Thornton, an elderly couple who have taken permanent residence at the boarding house since selling their small shop in a neighborhood that has become too expensive for their reduced circumstances, provide a perspective on how London's winter challenges have evolved over their lifetime. They remember when the city was smaller, when the fog was less oppressive, and when coal smoke had not yet transformed the very air into a constant presence that affects every aspect of daily life. Their stories of earlier winters, while perhaps tinged with the golden glow of memory, suggest that the current harsh conditions represent a relatively recent development in London's long history. As the meal progresses and the warmth of the food combines with the heat from the fireplace to create an atmosphere of genuine comfort, conversation turns to the small adaptations and strategies that make winter survival not just possible, but bearable. Mrs. Pemberton shares her techniques for keeping the building's various fires burning efficiently throughout the night, a complex process that involves calculating fuel consumption, managing airflow, and timing the addition of new coal to maintain steady heat without wasteful blazing. The maid, whose name is revealed to be Sarah, contributes her own insights into the domestic arts that keep a household functioning during winter months. Her knowledge of which types of coal burn hottest, how to arrange kindling for maximum efficiency, and where to purchase the best quality fuel at reasonable prices represents a practical education that would be valuable to anyone attempting to navigate Victorian winter conditions. Her hands, roughened by constant work but quick and skilled in their movements, demonstrate the folding techniques that help conserve heat in bedding and the arrangement of clothing that maximizes warmth while minimizing bulk. The conversation gradually shifts from practical matters to more philosophical observations about the nature of comfort and community during challenging times. Mr. Henderson remarks on how the harsh winter conditions seem to bring out both the best and worst in human nature, citing examples of remarkable generosity he has witnessed alongside disturbing instances of selfishness and cruelty. The shared experience of struggling against common challenges, he suggests, creates bonds between strangers that might never form under easier circumstances. Miss Richardson adds her own observations about the ways that winter transforms the rhythm of daily life, forcing people to slow down, plan more carefully, and appreciate simple pleasures that might be taken for granted during more comfortable seasons. The cup of hot tea that might be merely pleasant on a spring afternoon becomes a source of profound satisfaction when consumed after hours spent battling cold and fog. The simple act of warming one's hands before a coal fire takes on an almost ceremonial significance that connects the individual to countless generations of humans who have sought warmth and shelter during the harsh months of winter. As the dinner service concludes and the dishes are cleared away, the evening routine continues with activities designed to make the most of the remaining hours before bedtime. The parlor, with its more comfortable furniture and larger fireplace, becomes the natural gathering place for those who wish to extend the social aspects of the evening. Here, an assortment of chairs and a small sofa, all positioned to take advantage of the fire's warmth, provides seating for guests who prefer conversation and companionship to the solitude of their individual rooms. The lighting in the parlor reflects the careful balance between comfort and economy that characterizes all aspects of Victorian winter living. Gas fixtures mounted on the walls provide steady illumination, but their flames are kept low to minimize both cost and heat production that might compete with a coal fire. Oil lamps on side tables supplement the gas lighting and create pools of warmer, more intimate light that encourage quiet conversation and reading. Candles, though more expensive to operate than gas, are sometimes used for special occasions or when guests are willing to pay extra for the romantic atmosphere they provide. The furniture arrangement in the parlor speaks to the social customs and practical necessities that govern Victorian domestic life. The chairs, upholstered in dark fabrics that won't show soot stains, are positioned to facilitate conversation while ensuring that everyone has access to the fire's warmth. Small tables provide surfaces for books, needlework, writing materials, and the cups of tea that punctuate the evening's activities. A bookshelf filled with volumes that have been donated by former guests or purchased secondhand from local dealers offers reading material that ranges from popular novels to educational works on history, geography, and practical subjects. The evening's entertainment options reflect both the limitations and possibilities of Victorian winter leisure. Reading, perhaps the most common individual activity, takes on special pleasure when pursued in warm surroundings after a day spent struggling with harsh conditions. The novels of Charles Dickens, with their vivid descriptions of London life and their themes of human resilience in the face of adversity, seem particularly appropriate for winter evening reading. Educational books, including accounts of exploration and travel to exotic locations, provide mental escape from the immediate challenges of winter survival. Needlework and other handicrafts offer both practical benefits and social opportunities during the long winter evenings. Miss Richardson, drawing on her professional skills, often works on personal sewing projects while participating in the parlor's general conversation. Her nimble fingers create garments and household items that will provide additional warmth and comfort during the remaining winter months. Other guests contribute their own skills, with some working on knitting projects that will produce scarves, mittens, and other accessories essential for winter survival. Writing letters represents another important evening activity that serves both practical and emotional purposes. Correspondence with family and friends in other locations provides a connection to the outside world that becomes particularly important during winter months when travel is difficult and social activities are limited. The act of writing itself, with its requirement for quiet concentration and careful thought, provides a meditative quality that helps to calm the mind after a day spent dealing with the stresses and challenges of urban winter living. The card games and simple parlor games that occasionally enliven the evening routine reflect the Victorian taste for social activities that combine entertainment with the possibility of modest intellectual challenge. Whist, a card game that requires both skill and concentration, provides an engaging way to pass the evening hours while maintaining the social interaction that helps to combat the isolation that winter conditions can create. Other games, including word games and simple puzzles, offer similar benefits while accommodating different levels of education and social background among the boarding house guests. As the evening progresses and the coal fire settles into its steady, glowing burn, the parlor takes on an atmosphere of comfortable intimacy that transforms a collection of strangers into a temporary community. The shared experience of seeking shelter from winter's harsh conditions creates a bond that transcends the usual social barriers that might separate people of different backgrounds and circumstances. Conversations that begin with practical matters, the weather, the condition of the streets, the cost of coal, gradually expand to include more personal topics as the warmth and comfort of the surroundings encourage openness and connection. The sounds that define the evening routine create their own particular atmosphere of domestic comfort and security. The crackling of the coal fire provides a constant, soothing background that masks many of the harsher sounds from the street outside. The gentle ticking of a mantel clock marks the passage of time without creating urgency or stress. Conversations, conducted in the modulated tones appropriate to respectable society, create a human music that speaks of civilization and community. Occasionally, the sound of footsteps on the stairs or the closing of a door reminds everyone present of the building's other occupants, reinforcing the sense of being part of a larger community of people all seeking warmth, shelter, and human connection during the challenging winter months. As the evening settles into its deeper rhythms and the coal fire in the parlor burns down to a steady, hypnotic glow, the boarding house enters that magical period of winter night when the harsh realities of the outside world fade into insignificance compared to the small, perfect world of warmth and human companionship that exists within these protective walls. The fog that blankets London has thickened to the point where the gas lamps on the street below create only the faintest halo of light. Visible through the parlor windows is pale, ghostly orbs that seem to float in the darkness without revealing anything of the world they're meant to illuminate. The transition from evening activities to the quieter pursuits of late night happens gradually, almost imperceptibly, as the boarding house guests settle into the particular rhythm that defines Victorian winter nights. Mr. Henderson has opened a worn copy of David Copperfield, its pages yellowed with age and its binding softened by countless readings. The flickering light from the fireplace dances across the familiar words as he loses himself in Dickens's masterful portrayal of London life, finding comfort in the author's ability to transform hardship into something beautiful and meaningful. The book itself, purchased secondhand from a street vendor during better financial times, represents the democratization of literature that the Victorian era has brought about, making great writing accessible to working people who previous generations might never have encountered such works. Miss Richardson has taken up her needlework again, but now she works on something purely personal rather than the commercial sewing that occupies her days. By the light of a small oil lamp positioned carefully to illuminate her work without competing with the fire's warmth, she creates delicate embroidery on a pillowcase that will add a touch of beauty to her Spartan boarding house room. Her needle moves with the practiced efficiency of someone who has spent years perfecting this craft, creating patterns of flowers and vines that seem to grow beneath her fingers. The work serves multiple purposes. It provides useful household items, offers a meditative activity that calms the mind, and creates beauty in a world where aesthetic pleasure often seems secondary to mere survival. Mrs. Pemberton has settled into her favorite chair near the fire, a substantial piece of furniture that has been positioned to take advantage of both the warmth and the light from the flames. In her lap lies an account book where she records the daily expenses and income that keep her establishment running. The careful columns of figures tell the story of Victorian small business economics, where every penny must be accounted for and every expenditure justified. The cost of coal appears as a significant line item, along with expenses for food, gas, cleaning supplies, and the wages for young Sarah. Mrs. Pemberton's practiced, I can calculate the exact amount of coal needed to maintain comfortable temperatures throughout the building, while keeping costs within reasonable bounds. The elderly Mr. and Mrs. Thornton have positioned themselves in chairs close together near the fire, their long marriage evident in the comfortable way they share space and attention. Mr. Thornton works on whittling a small wooden figure, his arthritic hands moving slowly but surely as he shapes what appears to be a horse. The shavings from his work curl onto a small cloth spread across his lap, creating tiny spirals of wood that will eventually find their way into the fire to add their small contribution to the evening's warmth. Mrs. Thornton knits steadily on what appears to be a woolen sock, her needles clicking in a rhythm that has become as natural as breathing after decades of creating the warm clothing that her family has always needed to survive London's winters. Sarah, the young maid, has been given permission to join the parlor gathering after completing her evening duties in the kitchen and dining room. This small privilege, extended by Mrs. Pemberton's kindness, represents a significant break from the usual social hierarchies that govern Victorian domestic life. Sarah settles into a simple wooden chair at the edge of the circle, grateful for the opportunity to share in the warmth and companionship after a long day of physical labor. In her hands, she holds a letter from her family in the countryside, its pages worn soft from repeated reading. The connection to her rural home, where winter means different challenges but perhaps simpler pleasures, provides comfort during the long months when her work keeps her confined to the city. The coal fire has now reached that perfect stage of the evening burn where the flames have settled into a steady, mesmerizing dance that seems to hypnotize everyone within its influence. The individual pieces of coal have fused into a glowing mass that radiates heat with remarkable efficiency, creating a zone of warmth that extends several feet from the fireplace. The sound of the burning coal provides a constant, subtle background music that masks the distant sounds of the city and creates an atmosphere of complete privacy and security. Outside, London continues its winter existence, but from within the parlor, the city seems to belong to another world entirely. Occasionally, the sound of footsteps echoes from the street below, muffled by the fog and filtered through the building's walls until they become mysterious and romantic rather than harsh and immediate. The clip-clop of a late horse-drawn cab penetrates the evening quiet, suggesting stories of other people making their way through the winter night, perhaps seeking their own refuges of warmth and safety. The lighting in the parlor has now adjusted to its optimal evening configuration. The gas fixtures have been turned low, providing just enough illumination to prevent the space from becoming completely dependent on the firelight. Oil lamps on the side tables create pools of golden light that make reading and needlework possible while adding to the overall atmosphere of comfort and domesticity. The interplay between these different light sources creates a complex pattern of brightness and shadow that transforms the simple parlor into a space that seems almost magical in its ability to provide sanctuary from the harsh world outside. Conversation during this deepest part of the evening takes on a different quality from the dinner table discussions that preceded it. Talk flows more slowly, punctuated by comfortable silences where the only sounds are the crackling of the fire and the small domestic noises of people engaged in quiet activities. Mr. Henderson shares observations about the books he has been reading, his thoughts moving from specific plot points to larger reflections on human nature and the challenges of urban life. His education, while modest by upper-class standards, has given him an appreciation for literature and ideas that transforms what might otherwise be simple entertainment into genuine intellectual exploration. Miss Richardson contributes stories from her workplace, describing the fashions that wealthy women commission for winter wear and the ingenious ways that dressmakers adapt styles to accommodate the practical needs of London winter survival. Her professional insights reveal the complex relationship between social status and physical comfort, where the demands of fashion often conflict with the requirements of staying warm and dry during the harsh months. She describes gowns designed with hidden layers for warmth, clever adaptations of sleeve designs to accommodate muffs and hand warmers, and the use of fabrics and colors that can disguise the inevitable soot stains that affect all outdoor clothing in London. The Thorntons, drawing on their long experience as small business owners, share observations about the ways that winter affects all aspects of commercial life in the city. They describe how shopkeepers must balance the costs of heating their establishments against the need to provide comfortable environment for customers, and how the fog can effectively shut down business for days at a time when visibility becomes too poor for safe travel. Their stories reveal the complex web of interdependence that keeps London functioning during winter months, where delays in coal deliveries can affect not just individual comfort, but entire neighborhoods' ability to maintain basic services. Mrs. Pemberton, when she participates in the conversation, offers insights into the domestic arts that keep households functioning during the challenging winter months. Her knowledge encompasses everything from most efficient ways to arrange furniture, to maximize warmth distribution, to the techniques for preserving food during periods when fresh supplies become difficult to obtain. She describes the careful calculations involved in managing a boarding house during winter, where the need to provide adequate comfort for guests must be balanced against the economic realities of operating costs that can fluctuate dramatically based on weather conditions. Young Sarah, when she finds the courage to contribute to the adult conversation, provides a different perspective based on her rural background. She describes winters in the countryside where cold might be even more severe, but where the air remains clear and the sources of warmth, wood fires and livestock, create different challenges and opportunities. Her comparisons between rural and urban winter survival reveal the trade-offs that define different approaches to dealing with harsh weather. While city life provides access to coal, manufactured goods, and services that rural areas lack, it also creates dependencies and vulnerabilities that don't exist in more self-sufficient rural communities. As the evening progresses toward night, the activities in the parlor gradually wind down. Books are closed and set aside for tomorrow's reading. Needlework is carefully put away in baskets and bags designed to protect delicate projects from the soot and dust that permeate all London environments. The oil lamps are extinguished one by one, leaving the parlor illuminated primarily by the warm glow of the coal fire, which is now burned down to a bed of glowing embers that will provide heat throughout most of the night. The process of preparing for bed begins with the ritual of warming bedrooms that have been unheated throughout the day. Mrs. Pemberton produces a collection of warming pans, long-handled metal containers designed to hold hot coals that can be moved between bed sheets to create pockets of warmth in otherwise cold sleeping areas. The coals for these warmers come from the parlor fire, carefully selected and transferred to ensure that they will burn safely without creating fire hazards. This nightly routine represents one of the many small technologies that Victorians have developed to make winter living bearable without requiring the enormous expense of heating every room in a building. The transition from the communal warmth of the parlor to the private chill of individual bedrooms requires both physical and psychological preparation. Heavy shawls and wraps are gathered around shoulders to provide insulation during the brief journey through unheated corridors. Candles are lit to provide both illumination and small amounts of heat for the nighttime routine. Hot water bottles, filled with water heated in the kitchen, become treasured possessions that can provide warmth for hours under thick blankets. The sounds of the boarding house, as it prepares for night, create their own particular symphony of domestic life. Footsteps echo on wooden stairs as guests make their way to their rooms. Doors close with the solid sound of heavy wood, creating private spaces where individuals can continue their personal routines away from the social demands of communal living. Water can be heard running in the kitchen as Sarah prepares the hot water bottles and warming pans that will help everyone sleep comfortably despite the cold. The building itself contributes its own sounds as the wooden structure creaks and settles in response to the temperature changes that accompany the transition from day to night. The last few minutes in the parlor, as the fire burns down to its nighttime configuration, take on a contemplative quality that seems to summarize and distill the entire experience of Victorian winter evening life. The remaining warmth represents security and comfort in the face of harsh external conditions. The lingering traces of conversation and companionship speak to the human connections that make survival not just possible, but meaningful. The simple domestic arrangements, the comfortable chairs, the adequate lighting, the carefully tended fire, demonstrate the ways that ordinary people create extraordinary experiences of beauty and satisfaction even under challenging circumstances. The transition from the communal warmth of the parlor to the private sanctuary of your boarding house room marks the beginning of the most contemplative portion of the Victorian winter night. As you climb the narrow wooden stairs, each step creaking softly under your weight, the temperature gradually decreases with each floor you ascend. The corridors, lit only by a single gas fixture at each end, create pools of amber light separated by stretches of shadow that seem to deepen the sense of moving from the public sphere into increasingly private and personal space. Your room, when you finally reach it, presents itself as a small sanctuary that has been transformed by the warming pan that Sarah carried up from the parlor fire just minutes before your arrival. The metal container, filled with glowing coals and carefully maneuvered between your bed sheets, has created an envelope of warmth that feels almost magical after the chill of the corridor. The sensation of slipping between warmed bedding represents one of the most purely physical pleasures available during a Victorian winter, a moment when the gap between comfort and discomfort becomes so pronounced that the simple act of achieving warmth takes on an almost spiritual significance. The coal fire in your room's small grate has been carefully banked for the night, its flames reduced to a steady glow that will provide heat for several hours without requiring attention. The technique for achieving this perfect overnight burn represents a skill that every Victorian must master, involving the precise arrangement of coal pieces and the careful regulation of airflow to maintain combustion without creating wasteful blazing. The fire's gentle crackling provides a soothing background sound that masks the occasional noises from other rooms and creates an atmosphere of complete privacy and security. The window of your room, with its small panes of glass divided by lead mullions, has become a canvas for the artistic effects of winter weather and coal smoke. Condensation from the temperature difference between indoor and outdoor air has created patterns of moisture that catch and reflect the firelight in constantly changing configurations. The view outside, when it can be glimpsed through the thick fog, reveals only the faintest suggestions of other buildings and the occasional glow of a gas lamp struggling to penetrate the murky atmosphere. This visual isolation, rather than feeling oppressive, creates a sense of being suspended in a private world where the usual constraints and demands of daily life have temporarily dissolved. The ritual of preparing for sleep in a Victorian winter room involves a complex choreography of clothing changes, personal hygiene, and heat conservation strategies. The washstand, with its ceramic pitcher and basin, presents the nightly challenge of personal cleanliness using water that has taken on the room's cold temperature despite having been heated earlier in the day. The shock of cold water against warm skin becomes a bracing reminder of the physical challenges that define Victorian winter living, but it also provides a sense of accomplishment and moral satisfaction that reflects the era's emphasis on cleanliness as both a practical necessity and a spiritual virtue. The clothing worn for sleeping during winter months reflects the careful balance between warmth and practicality that governs all aspects of Victorian life. Heavy flannel nightgowns or nightshirts, often worn over regular undergarments for additional insulation, become essential equipment for winter survival. Woolen stockings, knitted caps, and other accessories that might seem excessive during warmer months become not just comfortable, but necessary for maintaining body heat during the long, cold hours of darkness. The process of changing from day clothes to night clothes requires careful timing to minimize exposure to cold air, creating a routine that combines efficiency with the maintenance of modesty that Victorian society demands. Once settled in bed, with the warming pan removed and the covers arranged for maximum heat retention, the room takes on an atmosphere that is perfectly suited for the kind of deep contemplation that winter nights seem to encourage. The fire's gentle glow creates moving patterns of light and shadow on the papered walls, transforming familiar furnishings into mysterious shapes that stimulate the imagination. The small circle of warmth created by the bedding becomes a perfect environment for reading, thinking, or simply observing the play of firelight while allowing the mind to wander through whatever thoughts the evening's experiences have generated. Reading by firelight represents one of the most purely pleasurable activities available during Victorian winter evenings. The book you have chosen, perhaps a volume of poetry, a novel, or a work of history or travel, takes on special significance when read under these intimate conditions. The flickering light creates a sense of urgency and preciousness around the act of reading, as if each page must be savored before the fire burns too low to provide adequate illumination. The content itself seems to resonate differently when encountered in this setting, where the comfort and security of the reading environment provides a stark contrast to whatever challenges or adventures the text might describe. The poetry of the Romantic era seems particularly appropriate for winter evening reading, with its emphasis on emotion, nature, and the individual's relationship to larger forces beyond human control. The works of Wordsworth, with their careful observation of natural phenomena and their celebration of quiet contemplation, provide perfect companionship for hours spent in warm solitude while winter rages outside. Byron's more dramatic verses offer adventure and passion that can transport the reader far from the confines of a small boarding house room to exotic locations where different challenges and different pleasures await the imagination. Novels, particularly those that deal with themes of endurance, community, and the triumph of human spirit over adverse circumstances, take on special resonance when read during winter evenings. The works of Dickens, with their vivid descriptions of London life and their deep sympathy for the struggles of ordinary people, seem almost to have been written specifically for moments like these. The contrast between the hardships described in the text and the current experience of warmth and security creates a heightened appreciation for both the fictional struggles and the real comfort that surrounds the reader. Travel literature and accounts of exploration provide another form of mental escape that seems perfectly suited to winter evening reading. Descriptions of tropical climates, exotic cultures, and distant lands offer the imagination a perfect counterpoint to the immediate experience of cold, fog, and urban confinement. The detailed accounts of explorers and adventurers create vivid mental images that can transport the reader to deserts, jungles, and tropical islands where winter is unknown and where warmth comes from the sun rather than from carefully tended coal fires. Historical works, particularly those dealing with earlier periods when winter survival presented even greater challenges than those faced by Victorians, provide perspective on the current situation while offering insights into the development of human civilization. Accounts of medieval life, with their descriptions of great halls where entire communities gathered around enormous fireplaces, help to place the current experience in the context of humanity's long struggle to create comfort and security in the face of natural challenges. Stories of exploration and settlement in harsh climates demonstrate the ingenuity and resilience that humans have always displayed when confronted with survival challenges. As the evening progresses toward true night, the fire gradually burns lower, requiring occasional attention to maintain its warming glow. The process of adding coal to the fire becomes a meditative ritual that provides a brief break from reading or thinking while creating an opportunity to observe the beautiful transformation that occurs when new fuel meets existing flames. The burst of light and heat that accompanies each addition of coal creates a moment of renewed warmth and brightness that makes the surrounding darkness seem even more intimate and protective. The sounds that define the deep winter night in Victorian London create their own unique atmosphere of urban solitude. The distant sounds of the city, the occasional clip-clop of a late cab, the muffled voices of people making their way through the fog, the distant chiming of church bells marking the hours, serve as reminders of the larger world while emphasizing the privacy and security of the immediate environment. The building itself contributes its own subtle symphony as wooden structures creak and settle in response to temperature changes, and other guests move quietly through their own evening routines. The fog outside has now thickened to the point where it seems almost solid, creating a sense of complete isolation that is both peaceful and slightly mysterious. The gas lamps on the street below have become merely suggestions of light, their glow absorbed and diffused by the thick atmosphere until they provide no useful illumination, but instead create an otherworldly ambience that transforms the familiar urban landscape into something that could have emerged from a Gothic novel. This visual isolation, rather than feeling threatening, creates a cocoon-like atmosphere that enhances the sense of being completely protected from the outside world. The coal fire has now settled into its perfect nighttime configuration, burning steadily and quietly while providing just enough heat to keep the room comfortable for sleeping. The flames have diminished to a gentle glow that continues to create moving patterns of light without being bright enough to interfere with rest. The sound of burning coal has become so constant and gentle that it forms a perfect background for sleep, masking other sounds while providing the psychological comfort that comes from knowing that warmth and light are readily available throughout the night. Personal reflection during these quiet hours takes on a special quality that seems uniquely suited to winter evenings. The combination of physical comfort, visual beauty, and complete privacy creates ideal conditions for the kind of deep thinking that busy daytime schedules rarely allow. Thoughts move naturally from immediate concerns to larger questions about life, purpose, and the nature of human experience. The contrast between the harsh conditions outside and the warm security inside becomes a metaphor for the human condition itself, where individuals must create meaning and comfort in the face of natural forces that remain indifferent to human needs and desires. The contemplation of time takes on particular significance during these winter evenings, when the normal markers of daily routine have been suspended by the fog and darkness outside. Hours pass unmeasured except by the gradual burning down of the coal fire and the occasional chiming of distant church bells. This suspension of normal temporal awareness creates an opportunity for reflection that seems both luxurious and necessary. allowing the mind to process the day's experiences while preparing for whatever challenges tomorrow might bring. The sense of gratitude that develops during these quiet hours represents one of the most valuable aspects of Victorian winter evening experience. The simple pleasure of being warm, dry, fed, and safe becomes magnified by awareness of the harsh conditions that exist just beyond the protective walls of the boarding house. This heightened appreciation for basic comforts creates a state of mind that finds profound satisfaction in simple pleasures that might otherwise be taken for granted. As the night deepens into its most profound hours, the small room with its gently glowing coal fire becomes a sanctuary that seems to exist outside of normal time and space. The fog that blankets London has reached such density that it appears to muffle not just sound, but the very passage of time itself, creating an atmosphere where minutes and hours lose their usual meaning and the present moment expands to encompass everything that matters about human existence. The coal fire has settled into its perfect overnight burn, providing steady warmth and a hypnotic glow that transforms the simple furnishings of the boarding house room into elements of a private temple dedicated to contemplation and rest. The book that lies open in your hands, perhaps a volume of spiritual reflections or philosophical meditations that seems perfectly suited to these transcendent hours, has become less a text to be read than a companion to be experienced. The words on the page seem to resonate with deeper meaning when encountered in this setting, where the harsh realities of the external world have been reduced to a distant memory and the immediate experience consists entirely of warmth, comfort, and the gentle play of firelight across familiar objects. Reading becomes a form of meditation, where each sentence invites contemplation and each paragraph opens new avenues for reflection on the mysteries of human existence. The patterns of light and shadow created by the coal fire have evolved throughout the evening into an ever-changing display of natural artistry that rivals any human creation. The flames, now reduced to a gentle, steady glow, create subtle variations in brightness that cause familiar objects to appear and disappear, to transform and reveal new aspects of their character. The simple wooden chair by the window becomes alternately a sturdy piece of furniture and a mysterious presence, suggesting human figures from other times and places. The washstand with its ceramic pitcher and basin takes on the appearance of a shrine where daily rituals of cleanliness become acts of spiritual purification. The silence that has settled over the boarding house represents more than mere absence of sound. It has become a positive presence that seems to fill the space with peace and possibility. Occasionally, the building itself contributes gentle sounds as wooden beams expand and contract in response to temperature changes, creating soft creaks and sighs that seem to speak of the structure's own rest and contentment. These subtle architectural sounds, rather than disturbing the silence, seem to deepen it, creating a rhythm of rest that harmonizes perfectly with the gentle crackling of the coal fire. The warmth that surrounds you in the bed has now achieved that perfect balance where the body is neither too hot nor too cold, but exists in a state of complete physical comfort that allows attention to turn entirely inward. The heavy woolen blankets and thick feather comforter have created a microclimate of perfect temperature and humidity, a small world where the harsh realities of Victorian winter survival have been temporarily conquered through human ingenuity and careful preparation. This physical comfort becomes the foundation for a state of mental and spiritual peace that seems to connect the individual moment to larger patterns of human experience across time and culture. The window, with its frost patterns and its view into the fog-shrouded darkness beyond, has become a meditation on the relationship between interior and exterior worlds. The condensation on the glass creates delicate traceries that change constantly as temperature and humidity fluctuate, forming temporary works of art that exist for moments before dissolving and reforming in new configurations. These ephemeral patterns seem to mirror the transient nature of all human experience, reminding the observer that beauty and meaning can be found in the most temporary and fragile phenomena. The fog outside has now achieved such density that it has transformed the familiar urban landscape into something approaching the mystical. The occasional glow of a gas lamp, filtered through the thick atmosphere, appears as a soft star floating in an otherworldly space where the normal rules of distance and direction no longer apply. This visual transformation of the everyday world into something mysterious and wonderful becomes a metaphor for the way that contemplative states of mind can reveal new dimensions of meaning in the most ordinary experiences. Personal reflection during these sacred hours takes on qualities that seem to transcend the usual boundaries of individual consciousness. Thoughts move freely between past, present, and future, creating connections and insights that would be impossible during the more constrained awareness of normal waking consciousness. Memories of childhood winters, dreams of future possibilities, and present awareness of comfort and security blend together into a unified experience that seems to capture something essential about the continuity of human experience across time. The contrast between the harsh external conditions and the perfect internal environment becomes a source of profound philosophical reflection on the nature of human civilization itself. Every element of comfort and security that surrounds you represents countless generations of human learning, innovation, and cooperation. The coal that burns in the grate carries within it the stored energy of ancient forests and the labor of countless workers who extracted it from deep beneath the earth. The blankets that provide warmth represent the skills of shepherds, textile workers, and countless others who have contributed to the complex system that makes such comfort possible. The boarding house itself, with its careful arrangements for shared living and its provisions for individual privacy, represents a remarkable achievement in social organization that allows strangers to live together in harmony while maintaining their personal dignity and autonomy. Mrs. Pemberton's careful management, the work of young Sarah, and the cooperation of all the guests demonstrate the ways that human communities can create environments of mutual support and shared prosperity even under challenging conditions. The contemplation of literature and ideas during these quiet hours takes on a quality that seems to connect the individual reader to the great conversation that humanity has been conducting with itself across centuries. The book in your hands becomes a bridge to other minds, other times, and other perspectives that enrich and expand your own understanding of what it means to be human. Whether the text deals with spiritual matters, practical philosophy, or simply beautiful language used to describe human experience, it serves as a reminder that the current moment of comfort and contemplation is part of a larger tradition that extends backward to the earliest human attempts to find meaning in existence and forward to future generations who will face their own challenges while seeking their own moments of peace and understanding. The physical sensations of perfect comfort, the warmth of the bedding, the gentle heat from the fire, the soft support of the feather mattress, create a state of embodied awareness that seems to dissolve the usual tensions between mind and body, individual and environment, temporal and eternal. This state of integrated consciousness, where all aspects of experience harmonize into a unified whole, represents one of the highest achievements of human culture. The creation of conditions where individuals can experience their full potential for peace, reflection, and connection to larger meanings. The coal fire, now burning at its most perfect and sustainable rate, has become more than a source of physical warmth. It has become a symbol of human mastery over natural forces and a reminder of a long history of human relationships with fire as the foundation of civilization. The gentle, steady glow represents security, community, and the triumph of human ingenuity over the challenges posed by natural environments. At the same time, the fire's dependence on careful tending and appropriate fuel serves as a reminder of humanity's continued vulnerability and dependence on natural resources and social cooperation. The rhythm of breathing during these contemplative hours seems to synchronize with the gentle crackling of the coal fire and the subtle sounds of the building settling into its nighttime rest. This harmonization of personal rhythm with environmental sounds creates a sense of being perfectly integrated into the larger patterns of existence, where individual consciousness becomes part of a larger cosmic rhythm that encompasses everything from the rotation of the earth to the beating of the human heart. Time during these sacred hours seems to move according to different rules than those that govern normal waking consciousness. Minutes can feel like hours when filled with rich contemplation and meaningful reflection, while periods that might objectively last for extended duration can seem to pass in moments when consciousness is absorbed in particularly engaging thoughts or beautiful observations. This altered relationship to temporal awareness creates opportunities for experiences that seem to exist outside of normal time, providing access to states of consciousness that are both deeply personal and somehow universal. The sense of connection to other people during these solitary hours paradoxically becomes stronger rather than weaker as external distractions fade away. Awareness of the other guests in the boarding house, of Mrs. Pemberton's care and Sarah's service, of the countless unknown people throughout London who are facing their own challenges and finding their own sources of comfort, creates a feeling of solidarity and shared humanity that transcends physical proximity. This invisible community of people seeking warmth, safety, and meaning becomes a source of strength and inspiration that enriches the solitary experience rather than diminishing it. The appreciation for simple pleasures reaches its peak during these hours when the contrast between external harshness and internal comfort becomes most pronounced. The taste of the last sip of tea, consumed hours earlier but still remembered with satisfaction. The feel of clean sheets and warm blankets against skin that has been thoroughly warmed by the fire's heat. The sight of frost patterns on the window glass, creating temporary works of natural art. The sound of coal settling in the grate with gentle pops and crackles that speak of continuing warmth throughout the night. These simple sensory experiences become profound sources of satisfaction that demonstrate the human capacity to find deep meaning and genuine happiness in the most basic elements of existence. The contemplation of mortality and the passage of time takes on a peaceful quality during these hours that transforms what might otherwise be anxious thoughts into sources of wisdom and acceptance. The recognition that this perfect moment of comfort and contemplation will eventually end becomes a source of heightened appreciation rather than sorrow. The awareness that winter itself will eventually give way to spring creates anticipation rather than impatience. The knowledge that individual life is temporary becomes a motivation to savor present experience rather than a cause for despair. The coal fire continues its steady burn, providing the foundation for this extended meditation on comfort, security, and the capacity of human civilization to create beauty and meaning even under challenging circumstances. As the night progresses toward its deepest hours, the room settles into a state of perfect equilibrium where warmth, light, silence, and solitude combine to create conditions for the kind of profound rest and restoration that can only occur when all external pressures have been temporarily suspended and consciousness is free to explore its deepest capacities for peace and understanding. The coal fire has now settled into its deepest and most sustainable rhythm, burning with a steady, gentle glow that will carry warmth through the remaining hours of the night, while gradually diminishing toward the soft bed of embers that will greet the morning. The room has achieved that perfect state of atmospheric balance, where every element contributes to an environment of complete tranquility and preparation for the restorative sleep that represents the natural culmination of a Victorian winter evening. The harsh world outside, with its fog and cold and endless challenges, has faded into such complete irrelevance that it might belong to another universe entirely. The book that has been your companion through these contemplative hours now rests gently against the coverlet, its pages warm from the firelight, and its words having served their purpose of providing companionship and inspiration during the transition from active consciousness toward the receptive state that prepares the mind for sleep. The act of reading itself has evolved throughout the evening from active engagement with text to a more passive, meditative absorption of language and meaning that mirrors the gradual slowing of mental activity that naturally occurs as the body and mind prepare for rest. The patterns of light and shadow cast by the fire have become increasingly subtle and hypnotic, creating a visual environment that encourages the gentle dissolution of focused attention in favor of the softer, more diffuse awareness that characterizes the borderland between waking and sleeping consciousness. The familiar objects in the room, the washstand, the small wooden chair, the wardrobe with its simple contents, have taken on the quality of old friends whose presence provides comfort without demanding attention, contributing to the overall atmosphere of security and peace. The silence that surrounds the boarding house has deepened into something that feels almost sacred, broken only by the gentle, rhythmic sounds that speak of life continuing its peaceful rhythms throughout the building. The soft creak of wooden beams adjusting to temperature changes has become as regular and comforting as a heartbeat. Occasionally, the distant sound of a church bell marking the late hours drifts through the fog, its bronze voice muffled and made mysterious by the thick atmosphere, serving not to disturb the peace, but to deepen it by marking the passage of time in a larger world beyond these protective walls. The physical sensation of perfect warmth has now become so complete and natural that it seems like the normal state of being rather than a carefully achieved comfort. The body, thoroughly warmed by the fire's heat and insulated by layers of soft bedding, has relaxed into a state of complete physical ease where every muscle can release the tensions accumulated during the day's navigation of London's challenging winter conditions. This profound physical relaxation becomes the foundation for mental and emotional peace, creating conditions where consciousness can gradually release its grip on the concerns and complications of waking life. The window, with its ever-changing patterns of frost and condensation, has become a gentle focus for meditation on the beauty that can emerge from the interaction between natural forces and human shelter. The delicate traceries of ice crystals create temporary mandalas that form, evolve, and dissolve in endless succession, providing a visual representation of the constant change that characterizes all existence, while simultaneously demonstrating the eternal principles of pattern and beauty that underlie apparent chaos. Watching these ephemeral formations appear and disappear becomes a form of moving meditation that encourages the mind to release attachment to permanence while appreciating the constant creativity of natural processes. The fog outside has achieved such complete dominance over the visual landscape that it has transformed the urban environment into something approaching a blank canvas where imagination can project whatever scenes might encourage peaceful rest. The occasional dim glow of a gas lamp, filtered through the thick atmosphere until it becomes merely a suggestion of light, creates points of reference in an otherwise unlimited space that could represent anything from a pastoral countryside to an exotic foreign landscape, where winter takes forms entirely different from the London experience. Personal reflection during these transitional hours takes on a gentle, non-demanding quality that facilitates the natural progression towards sleep. Thoughts move slowly and peacefully, without the urgency or intensity that characterizes daytime mental activity. Memories surface and subside like gentle waves, bringing neither anxiety about the past nor worry about the future, but simply adding their quiet presence to the overall atmosphere of reflection and rest. This state of mental relaxation, where consciousness can observe its own contents without feeling compelled to act upon them, represents one of the most restorative aspects of proper preparation for sleep. The contemplation of the day's experiences takes on a quality of gentle review rather than anxious analysis. The challenges of navigating London's winter conditions, the pleasures of finding shelter and warmth, the social connections formed during the evening's communal activities, and the private satisfactions of reading and contemplation all blend together into a unified sense of a day well lived despite its difficulties. This peaceful integration of experience creates the psychological foundation for restorative sleep, where the mind can process and consolidate the day's learning without the interference of stress or anxiety. The coal fire requires one final tending before the transition to sleep can be completed. This ritual of banking the fire for the night becomes a meditation on the human relationship with the natural forces that sustain life and comfort. The careful arrangement of coal pieces to ensure slow, steady burning throughout the night represents a form of partnership with fire itself, where human intelligence and fire's energy combine to create the conditions for peaceful rest. The process requires attention and skill, but not anxiety or hurry, making it perfectly suited to the contemplative state that prepares consciousness for sleep. The sounds of the boarding house settling into its deepest nighttime rhythm create their own gentle lullaby that speaks of security and community. Somewhere in the building, other guests are conducting their own preparations for sleep, creating a sense of shared experience that enhances rather than disturbs individual solitude. The knowledge that misses. Pemberton maintains her vigilant care throughout the night, that Sarah has completed her duties and found her own rest, and that the building itself provides solid protection against the elements creates a network of security that allows individual consciousness to release its defensive alertness in favor of receptive rest. The clothing worn for sleep, carefully chosen for maximum warmth and comfort, has become so familiar and comfortable that it feels like a second skin designed specifically for the transition between waking and sleeping states. The heavy flannel nightgown or nightshirt, the woolen stockings, the soft cap that protects against heat loss from the head, all of these elements combine to create a microenvironment of perfect temperature and comfort that supports the body's natural progression toward sleep. The ritual of changing into these specialized garments becomes a signal to both body and mind that the time for active engagement with the world has ended and the time for rest and restoration has begun. The position of the body in the bed, carefully arranged to take maximum advantage of the warming pan's residual heat and the fire's radiant warmth, becomes a study in the art of comfort that Victorians have perfected through long experience with winter survival. Every aspect of the sleeping arrangement, from the placement of pillows to the arrangement of blankets, reflects accumulated wisdom about how to maintain warmth and comfort throughout the long winter night. This attention to detail in the creation of sleeping comfort represents a form of self-care that recognizes sleep not as a mere absence of consciousness, but as an active process that requires proper conditions to achieve its full restorative potential. The final few minutes before sleep involve a gradual release of attention from the external world toward the internal processes that will carry consciousness through the night. The fire's gentle glow continues to provide visual focus when eyes happen to open, but its hypnotic patterns encourage the natural closure of eyes and the inward turning of attention. The sounds of the night, the fire's crackling, the building's gentle settling, the distant and muffled sounds of the city beyond, become less distinct objects of attention and more elements of a unified soundscape that supports rather than disrupts the transition towards sleep. The breathing naturally slows and deepens as the body prepares for sleep, synchronizing with the gentle rhythms of the fire and the building and the larger patterns of the winter night. This harmonization of personal rhythm with environmental patterns creates a sense of being perfectly integrated into the larger systems that sustain life and comfort, where individual rest becomes part of a cosmic rhythm that encompasses everything from the rotation of the earth to the cycles of weather that bring both challenge and beauty to human experience. The mind's activity gradually shifts from the focused attention that characterizes waking consciousness toward the more diffuse, associative patterns that mark the transition towards sleep. Thoughts become less linear and more impressionistic, creating gentle flows of imagery and feeling that mirror the mind's preparation for the symbolic and restorative work that occurs during dreams. This natural progression toward altered consciousness represents one of the most remarkable aspects of human existence, where the same awareness that navigates complex social and practical challenges during the day can transform itself into the receptive state that allows for psychological healing and restoration during sleep. The room itself seems to participate in this transition toward rest, as the fire settles into its overnight configuration and the various objects take on the softened appearance that characterizes spaces prepared for sleep. The harsh edges of daytime utility soften into the gentle curves of nighttime comfort. The practical arrangements of daily life transform into the supportive environment for the mysterious processes that occur during sleep. This environmental transformation mirrors and supports the personal transition from the focused awareness required for dealing with Victorian winter challenges to the receptive consciousness that allows for the deep rest and restoration that make continued engagement with those challenges possible. The final conscious moments before sleep arrives involve a sense of gratitude that encompasses both the immediate experience of comfort and safety and the larger recognition of human ingenuity and cooperation that makes such comfort possible even under challenging natural conditions. This appreciation for present blessing, combined with confidence in the continuing protection provided by shelter, fire, and human community, creates the psychological foundation for the peaceful surrender of consciousness that marks the transition into restorative sleep. The room has now achieved its perfect nighttime state, where every element exists in harmonious balance to support the sacred process of sleep that represents both the culmination of the day's experiences and the foundation for tomorrow's possibilities. The coal fire burns with the steady, gentle glow that will maintain warmth throughout the night, while gradually diminishing toward the soft bed of embers that will greet the dawn. The fog outside has become so complete that it seems to have wrapped the entire boarding house in a protective cocoon that muffles all harsh sounds and creates an atmosphere of perfect tranquility where the soul can find the deep rest it requires. The transition from waking consciousness towards sleep occurs naturally and peacefully, like the gentle settling of snow or the gradual dimming of twilight. The book that has provided companionship throughout the evening now rests beside the bed, its words having fulfilled their purpose of guiding the mind through the contemplative journey that prepares consciousness for the receptive state necessary for restorative sleep. The act of setting aside this literary companion becomes a symbolic gesture that marks the completion of active engagement with external material and the beginning of the inward journey that sleep represents. The patterns of firelight continue their hypnotic dance across the walls and ceiling, but their visual impact gradually diminishes as the eyelids naturally grow heavy and the need to observe the external world gives way to the deeper need for internal restoration. The interplay of light and shadow that seemed so captivating during the evening's contemplative hours now serves as a gentle guide toward the dissolution of visual attention in favor of the inner landscape that emerges as consciousness prepares for sleep. These shifting patterns of illumination become less like objects to be observed and more like a natural environment that supports the transition between states of awareness. The physical sensation of perfect warmth has become so complete and natural that the body seems to float in an environment of ideal comfort, where no adjustment or attention is required to maintain the equilibrium between internal and external temperature. The careful layering of bedding, the residual warmth from the warming pan, and the steady heat from the coal fire have created a microclimate where the body can release all defensive tension and surrender completely to the restorative processes that occur during deep sleep. This physical ease becomes the foundation for mental and emotional peace, creating conditions where consciousness can safely release its vigilant monitoring of external conditions. The sounds that define the deep winter night have become so gentle and regular that they merge into a unified acoustic environment that supports rather than disturbs the approach of sleep. The soft crackling of coal in the grate provides a rhythmic background that synchronizes with the natural rhythm of breathing, creating a harmony between internal and external processes that encourages the mind to release its analytical functions in favor of the receptive state that characterizes the borderland between waking and sleeping. The occasional gentle creaking of wooden beams as the building adjusts to temperature changes becomes part of this natural symphony that speaks of security and rest. The window, with its ever-changing patterns of frost and condensation, has become a meditation on the beauty and impermanence that characterize all existence. But now these patterns are observed with the soft, unfocused gaze that marks the transition towards sleep, where sharp attention gives way to gentle awareness, and specific observation dissolves into general appreciation for the beauty that surrounds even the most ordinary moments of existence. The delicate traceries of ice crystals continue their constant formation and dissolution, but they now serve as a visual lullaby that encourages the natural closing of eyes and the inward turning of attention. Personal reflection during these final conscious moments takes on the quality of gentle completion rather than active analysis. The day's experiences, the challenge of navigating London's winter conditions, the pleasure of finding warmth and shelter, the satisfaction of human companionship, the joy of solitary contemplation, all settle into a unified sense of gratitude and accomplishment that requires no further examination or understanding. This peaceful integration of experience creates the psychological foundation for restorative sleep, where the mind can process and consolidate learning without the interference of conscious effort or anxiety. The breathing naturally deepens and slows as the body's internal rhythms adjust to support the approach of sleep. Each exhale releases a little more of the day's accumulated tension, while each inhale draws in not just air, but the peaceful atmosphere that surrounds the perfectly prepared sleeping environment. This rhythmic progression toward deeper relaxation creates a bridge between conscious breathing and the automatic respiratory patterns that will sustain life throughout the hours of sleep, marking the transition from voluntary to involuntary processes that characterizes the surrender to restorative unconsciousness. The coal fire, carefully arranged for overnight burning, settles into its role as guardian of warmth and comfort during the vulnerable hours of sleep. The gentle, steady heat it provides becomes a symbol of human mastery over natural challenges and a reminder that even during unconsciousness, the fruits of human intelligence and preparation continue to provide protection and comfort. The fire's presence creates not just physical warmth, but psychological security, allowing consciousness to release its protective vigilance in favor of the openness and receptivity that make deep sleep possible. The mind's activity gradually shifts from the linear, analytical thinking that characterizes waking consciousness toward the more fluid, associative patterns that prepare for the symbolic and restorative work of dreams. Thoughts become less distinct and more impressionistic, creating gentle flows of imagery and feeling that mirror the natural progression toward altered states of consciousness. This transformation represents one of the most remarkable aspects of human existence, where the same awareness that navigates complex challenges during the day can naturally evolve into the receptive state that allows for psychological healing and restoration during sleep. The room itself seems to participate in this transition toward rest, as all its elements settle into their nighttime configuration designed to support rather than stimulate consciousness. The fire burns quietly and steadily without requiring attention. The window provides gentle patterns of light and shadow without demanding observation. The furniture and personal belongings create an environment of familiarity and security without presenting any challenges or decisions. This environmental harmony mirrors and supports the personal transition from active engagement with the world to receptive surrender to the restorative processes of sleep. The sense of community and connection that has characterized the evening's experience continues to provide support even as individual consciousness prepares for solitude. The knowledge that other guests throughout the boarding house are finding their own rest, that Mrs. Pemberton's care continues even during her own sleep, and that the larger community of London continues its existence beyond the fog, creates a network of security that allows individual awareness to release its defensive alertness in favor of peaceful vulnerability. This invisible community of shared experience enhances rather than threatens the solitary journey into sleep. The physical position of the body in the bed, carefully arranged for maximum comfort and warmth throughout the night, becomes a study in the art of surrender that sleep requires. Every limb rests in its optimal position for relaxation. Every point of contact with bedding provides gentle support without creating pressure or discomfort. The arrangement of pillows, blankets, and personal warmth creates a perfect environment for the physical stillness that allows consciousness to turn inward toward the mysterious processes that occur during deep sleep. This attention to physical comfort represents a form of self-care that recognizes sleep as an active process requiring proper conditions to achieve its full potential for restoration and healing. The final conscious thoughts naturally turn toward appreciation for the remarkable sequence of events that has led from the harsh challenges of a Victorian winter day to this moment of perfect preparation for restorative sleep. The journey from the cold, fog-shrouded streets to the warmth and security of the boarding house represents a triumph of human ingenuity and cooperation over natural adversity. The progression from the social pleasures of communal evening activities to the private satisfactions of solitary contemplation demonstrates the full range of human needs and the ways that civilized society can provide for both community and individual fulfillment. The gratitude that fills these final moments of consciousness encompasses both the immediate experience of comfort and safety and the larger recognition of the countless people and processes that make such comfort possible. From the miners who extracted the coal to Mrs. Pemberton who tends the boarding house, from the authors whose books provide companionship to the craftspeople who created the furniture and bedding, every element of current comfort represents the contribution of human knowledge, skill, and care accumulated over generations. This awareness of interconnection and mutual dependence creates a sense of belonging to something larger than individual existence, while simultaneously honoring the value and dignity of personal experience. The coal fire continues its steady burn, providing the foundation for this final transition into sleep. Its gentle warmth surrounds the bed like an embrace, while its soft glow creates moving patterns that encourage the natural closing of eyes and the inward turning of attention. The sound of burning coal provides a rhythmic background that harmonizes with breathing and heartbeat, creating a unified acoustic environment that supports the dissolution of conscious attention in favor of the receptive awareness that makes deep sleep possible. The window, still displaying its ever-changing patterns of frost and condensation, becomes a final meditation on the beauty and mystery that surround even the most ordinary moments of existence. But now these patterns are observed with the soft, unfocused gaze that marks the actual approach of sleep, where specific observation gives way to general appreciation and analytical attention dissolves into peaceful surrender. The delicate beauty of these natural formations serves as a gentle bridge between the appreciative consciousness of waking life and the symbolic awareness that emerges during dreams. The silence that has settled over the boarding house deepens into something that feels both protective and nurturing, broken only by the gentle sounds that speak of life continuing its peaceful rhythms throughout the building and the larger city beyond. These soft acoustic presences, the fires crackling, the buildings settling, the distant and muffled sounds of London's nighttime existence, become less distinct objects of attention and more elements of a unified soundscape that cradles consciousness as it prepares for its nightly journey into the restorative depths of sleep. The breathing naturally synchronizes with these environmental rhythms, creating a harmony between internal and external processes that facilitates the transition from voluntary to automatic functions. Each breath carries awareness deeper into the state of relaxed receptivity that makes restorative sleep possible, while the gradual slowing of respiratory rhythm marks the approach of the altered consciousness that will process the day's experiences and prepare the mind and body for tomorrow's challenges and opportunities. The final moments of consciousness involve a complete surrender to the mysterious processes that occur during sleep, where human awareness temporarily releases its analytical functions in favor of the symbolic and restorative work that can only occur during this altered state. This surrender represents not a defeat, but a triumph of wisdom, where consciousness chooses to trust in the natural processes that have sustained human life and development throughout history. The transition into sleep becomes not an ending, but a transformation, where the same awareness that has navigated the complexities of Victorian winter survival evolves into the receptive state that allows for healing, restoration, and preparation for whatever adventures tomorrow might bring. The coal fire burns on steadily through the night, its gentle warmth maintaining the perfect environment for deep, restorative sleep, while its soft glow provides comfort for any momentary awakening that might occur during the night's journey. The room remains a sanctuary of peace and security, where the harsh realities of the external world cannot penetrate and where consciousness can safely explore the inner landscapes that emerge during dreams. And in this perfect environment, surrounded by the fruits of human ingenuity and care, sleep arrives naturally and peacefully, carrying awareness into the mysterious realm where restoration and renewal prepare the soul for another day of life in all its challenge and beauty.